Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Concilio's Better Places podcast, where I'm delighted to say I'm joined today by Alex Woolf, Chief Operating Officer of Romulus, and we're here to discuss the transformation from Centre Court in Merton to the Wimbledon Quarter, talk about the latest retail trends and how Alex and the Romulus team have repositioned the shopping centre. First, Alex, maybe a little bit of introduction about yourself and Romulus.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Alex. Romulus is a family business. We've been around for about 50 years, based in southwest London. We've got a team now of about 70 people. We look after about 1 million square foot of commercial space, mainly in London.
Fantastic. Now, Romulus acquired the Centre Court shopping centre in 2021, probably at a time when most people weren't investing in shopping centres. They were kind of seen as last year's news. What potential did Romulus see in the property that others missed, especially at a time, as I said, when a lot of people were quite pessimistic about retail's chances?
So I think the first thing I'd say is that it's an exceptionally well located site, right in the heart of Wimbledon, right on top of the train station, which has great connection to London. So the location was very good. And not only that, the location benefits from a really, really strong catchment. So we felt that regardless of what happened to the centre, it was always underpinned by this very affluent local demographic. And we felt that what had been there previously probably didn't play to that as well as it could. I'd also say that there were a few other things that made it interesting. Was that there was a real ability to be able to make changes in a way that we thought was suitable. So it was a freehold site. It had very, very good and extensive frontage externally. So a lot of kind of shopping centres often are kind of subsumed within.
They're very inward looking, aren't they, rather than outward looking?
And this one was inward looking, but it was inward looking, but had the blank frontages, and we'll get into it later. But the ability to be able to open things up again was very possible. And then I think the last thing I'd say is that we were probably a bit unique in our approach, and actually the things that put a lot of people off, we really liked. So it was in this strange transition where it was not well occupied enough to be of any interest to institutional investors. It was over half vacant, but it had enough occupancy to also really put off anyone who wanted to demolish the entire centre. You had lots of long inside the act leases in the parts of the centre that still worked. But actually we really liked that because we wanted to keep the bits that worked and change the bits that didn't, and we're happy using our platform to kind of work around existing tenants and reposition things. And we really liked the fact that, frankly, we wouldn't be able to afford it if it had been fully let and trading really well. And we probably wouldn't be able to afford it, frankly, if it was also completely vacant at the same time. So it sat in this strange middle zone that puts off a lot of people. So
you inherited, is it an empty Debenhams? Or what was a Debenhams? So there was an anchor store at the end. So a third of the building, is that pretty accurate, was empty?
Yeah, just over a third. So there was about 110,000 square foot empty Debenhams who left before the pandemic. So they left in 2019. And as soon as they left, then you started to see the kind of occupancy of the centre really begin to fall off. So which
must have been a major driver of footfall, I assume, with Debenhams. So without that...
So footfall was about 9 million, maybe just over that, before Debenhams left. Debenhams then left, and you saw what was essentially then the back of the centre around an old atrium become very vacant, and nearly everybody started to leave the upper levels of the centre. And so you had this real drop-off, and then obviously hit by COVID in 2020, which exacerbated.
So did you purchase this during COVID, or it was during the time?
During COVID, we actually were. It was kind of in between various lockdowns. It was March 2021 when we actually purchased the centre, so it was going through those bits at the time.
So obviously during COVID, there was a sense that the world has changed, and certainly we all grew very used to online shopping, even more so than perhaps was the trend before, and also online food deliveries and so on. So again, being the owner of a bricks and mortar retail hub, again, it must have been, you must have thought when looking at the numbers.
So there's no doubt that the pandemic made things a lot harder. It was frankly harder to even just go and see the space when various lockdowns were happening and go around it. And you're right, there were definitely concerning headwinds about retail, and delivery was booming. You saw all of those company share prices go absolutely mad during that period of time, and obviously retail bricks and mortar style was going the other way. There were some exceptions to that, though, that we were beginning to see even at the time, which were quite interesting. So we were hearing interesting anecdotes of cafes in Wimbledon which had been shut for half of 2020, but had made more money in the halves that they were open during the breaks in lockdown than they would make in a normal full year, because you had all these people who were working from home, able to go out, wanting to find places to go to buy a coffee, to have local pastries, to do stuff locally. And so we're beginning to hear these interesting anecdotes about these kind of local spaces that were doing unusually well, that weren't just tech-based, but had an interesting demographic slant to that. And that becomes a big part, which I think we'll probably get into later.
Yeah, so once you acquired the centre, what was your initial overall vision that you wanted to achieve here?
So the initial overall vision hasn't actually really changed since we started. The overall, taking a huge step back to the highest possible level, we felt that the space clearly no longer worked as a regional shopping centre, and for Wimbledon to compete with Kingston and Putney High Street and Southside and other large London retail destinations just wasn't working, with or without the pandemic. Frankly, with or without Debenhams, it didn't have enough point of difference. But as I touched on earlier, you have this amazing demographic base in Wimbledon. And so our vision was to think about changing the centre's focus away from let's be a regional shopping centre towards let's be a locally focused centre and let's provide things that local people want. So that's the kind of bigger picture approach. And then as we kind of begin to unpack what that means, that meant for us trying to understand how we make the ground floor retail work again. So opening up the centre, making it feel part of the town centre. The F&B in the centre used to be up on the second floor, bizarrely, up with the loos. And so a big part of that was both bringing the loos down, but also looking to bring the cafes and restaurants down to ground floor and using them to help reinvigorate the retail at ground level. The big issue, though, was at the first floor, where retail was really not working and, frankly, doesn't work at all. We're in a situation where business rates were 4 times our ERVs up there. So it's impossible to ever rent it as a retail, even if we'd put 0 on it. And so there it was about thinking back to that perspective of we need to bring in uses that local people want, and then thinking about what local people might want. So thinking about leisure, thinking about local workspace, thinking about private medical, health, well-being uses, and putting together and beginning to curate a mixture at that first floor level that actually adds a local destination element that then supports the retail, and then the idea of being all these uses mutually reinforcing.
So as part of this process, you started the journey of rebranding.
Yes.
What was Centre Court to Wimbledon Quarter. It's quite a shift in identity. It looks fantastic. Can you talk us through the thinking about the name change and the overall rebranding strategy? Was that do you need to, it's a bit chicken and egg? What came first, the rebrand and that attracted tenants, or the tenants and then thinking, right, we've got something special on our hands here, we can look to rebrand?
So brand and marketing is actually what I did for 5 or 6 years prior to moving into real estate. And one of the things that is normally key to doing a good rebrand is it needs to align with your strategy. And if you're not trying to do the things that your brand is saying, it doesn't work. And so the whole idea behind moving away from Centre Court Shopping Centre to a new brand was trying to reflect the fact that the centre was changing from being a regional shopping centre to being this local neighbourhood orientated hub, and making it feel part of the town centre. I should mention, coupled to that too, unfortunately, calling a shopping centre Centre Court Shopping Centre when you're right next to Wimbledon Centre Court is challenging. We sometimes be in there during the tennis. And
people would genuinely it must be incredible. How on earth you can sort that to be that?
SEO is very difficult. Any IP you can't possibly ever own. It's
you can see the initial logic, but then actually
and
when you
cause some
implement
confusion. You'd have some people in there during the tennis who'd be looking for the tennis, and it's actually 20 minutes down the road. But actually, the more fundamental reason, as I was saying, it was about trying to align our strategy with the brand, and we want to make it not be a shopping centre anymore, not feel like it's a shopping centre, but be this local neighbourhood space where you can shop, but also do a whole range of other local activities like work out, eat and drink, and making it feel like it is a part of the town centre or a quarter of the town centre. And so that's where the idea came from. And we had a number of workshops with a range of local residents and local businesses to try and take them on our journey and kind of get their view as well, because if the centre doesn't work for people locally, it's not going to work, particularly if our strategy is to get local people to come here more often. Of course. So they're key to everything.
What did you find when you were doing that research? Independents and bigger chains was the kind of feedback, or not? What were people telling you they wanted to see at the centre?
So, yeah, we had a lot of very strong opinions, and actually very helpful opinions from people locally. People definitely wanted to still shop locally.
Yeah.
And that's still one of the things we hear today, and one of the things that is a key part of what's still and hopefully about to come through in the next few months in terms of a whole series of new shops.
Yeah.
It has been particularly challenging for the reasons you've touched on, but retail headwinds are more positive now. We also heard yet more independence, and that was part of our strategy as well, was we didn't want to compete with the existing, actually very successful high street in Wimbledon. We wanted to complement it. And Wimbledon High Street is very, very busy, very, very narrow, lots of chains.
Yep.
And what we want to do in Wimbledon Quarter is to complement that by creating spaces that actually have a bit more space. So we had some really nice big internal areas that people can kind of sit and relax in. We had some really nice external areas on Queen's Road. It's a kind of perpendicular street, old civic centre of Wimbledon, the old fire station, the old Baptist church, the old magistrates court.
Yep.
All sit along that street.
And they were closed off when you purchased.
Completely closed off. Yes, you had storage areas for shops, you had complete back of house areas, and we wanted to bring them back to life again, have outside seating, and create a space that sits alongside the town centre. And as we really see Wimbledon Quarter as part of Wimbledon Town Centre, not an enclosed separate space. And our strategy that we've been working through and what we're continuing to do over the next few years is looking to deliver that.
So as well as bringing kind of more independent local
Yep.
brands, which you can certainly see would appeal to the Wimbledon demographic. You've got some exciting new tenants like Third Space, becoming part of Gymbledon, I believe it's called now. There's a lot of gyms in the area. Climbing facilities for Little Gym, as well as your own office space huddle. Is that all about, because much as you said it's part of the high street, you do need to make it distinct and increase the dwell time, I assume, within the centre. So was this kind of multi-use strategy something that you recognised right at the start you needed to do in order to get that footfall back up to where it once was?
Yes, it was kind of the third pillar of our strategy. The first was doing some placemaking to make it a nicer place again, because it just had been underinvested in for about a decade. And so, we put this new courtyard in, put this sliding roof on, opened things up to the centre. And then the tenant mix came next. And the tenant mix was all about bringing in this bigger range of uses to support the retail, particularly at the first floor. And it was about creating the right mix. So, we recognised there was an opportunity in leisure. And but we didn't want to just bring in a whole bunch of gyms. We wanted to bring in a mixture, again, of leisure opportunities that both complement each other, but also actually that appeal to the wide demographic of Wimbledon. So Third Space was about generally appealing to the younger professional. And then we had boardroom climbing, which is actually a slightly younger target market of people who are looking to climb, particularly in the winter when it's cold outside. Golf Groove was a slightly older demographic as well. We've also brought in Little Gym, which is a kind of kids gymnastics class. Right. As well as Strong Pilates as a Pilates studio. They actually came in on the back of the fact that the Third Space Pilates classes basically sell out as fast as Glastonbury tickets go. Wow. It's absolutely mad.
Brilliant.
Given the popularity of that. But it's really creating a mix, both within the kind of leisure category of leisure uses that work, but also within the centre as a whole of uses that work together. And Third Space, as you correctly point out, has been a particularly important one for us. Because it's such a large facility, because they invested so much money in it, because it brings over 1,500 people a day into Wimbledon Quarter. And really, based on where we started, that's 100,000 net new people. Those people weren't really already coming into the centre.
And when you're looking to then let the retail space, which you still have, I presume these footfall numbers and the demographic must make it an incredible draw for you in terms of attracting tenants now.
It definitely does, and it's definitely improved. Third Space has definitely brought along others. Footfall numbers have increased significantly, so we're back up now at just over 7 million a year. We broke 7 million last year. We think we'll be somewhere between 8 and 8.5 this year. Numbers are still rising, and we expect within a couple of years' time we should be at hopefully record levels within the centre. Because as you were rightly pointing out, within Wimbledon as a whole, footfall in Wimbledon is actually at record levels all time currently. The footfall counters that the Business Investment District have on the high street show record levels. And that actually similarly is feeding through to spend too, which is really interesting.
When it comes to the new occupiers of Centre Court, I guess one of the easier decisions in some respects must have been to bring your own office space brand in, Huddle, but clearly you wouldn't have done that if you didn't feel that the right kind of market was there for it. So what made you think kind of an office provision where previously there was none would actually work at this location?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it really came down to actually one of the things we observed when Third Space first opened is that their customers were, in their words, misusing the space quite heavily. So post-COVID, you had a lot of people using the gym, and you still do actually, during quite odd hours. So, you'll go in on a Tuesday and the gym will actually be quite busy at 11 a.m.
Right.
And people will have done a workout and then will then sit in the massage chairs taking Teams calls. And it became pretty clear that there was an appetite for spaces to work near home when people are working 2 to 3 days a week from home. And from an employer perspective, just putting the shoe on the other foot for a second, they probably would rather those people working in a proper office space with fast internet rather than taking their Teams call from a massage chair in Third Space.
I'm picturing some of my team at the moment. I'm wondering why they look distracted. Perhaps that might be why.
So, when we started Huddle actually in the space we're sitting in now, about 7 years ago, as, one of those many co-working spaces that emerged, frankly, on the back of WeWork. When we were looking at launching in Wimbledon, though, we recognised that Wimbledon needed a different model of workspace to what we've done here in Hammersmith, because it's a much more local area and much more community orientated, and there's fewer large corporates. Yeah. And so the whole model when we launched in Wimbledon is much more locally led and hospitality led. So there's a standalone independent cafe at ground floor, which is kind of where we have our most flexible memberships, where you can really come in, have a coffee and work for a few hours. It's then a lot more flexible membership orientated too. So we have a much larger, as a proportion of the total space, co-working area where freelancers and small startups can work in a collaborative environment. A much larger proportion of a co-working space than you'd normally see. And then we have some really nice small private offices that sit within what used to be the old fire station for businesses of 2 people up to about 30 people. And what we've seen in Wimbledon actually is that of all the 3 centres that we've opened, it was the fastest one ever. We opened essentially 100% full on day one, because there was in Wimbledon as a whole, although it does have office space and some quite good office space, the flexible workspace provision in particular is very poor, and there was no really, really good local space. And with the shifts around where people want to work, people actually like starting and opening and growing small businesses in their local area with good transport connections, and they want a space for their team of 2, 5, 10, 15 people to work from. And having a Third Space gym next door, a golf centre people can go to after work, restaurants and cafes, actually creates an amazing amenity offer and a far better amenity offer than you get in a big corporate building in central London. So we've had this kind of unique value proposition we've been able to pull together, and it's been great. So
is it kind of entrepreneurs setting up businesses, or is it people who are working from home but don't actually want to work from home and want to work 5 minutes walk away? What's the kind of mix?
The answer is it's both. It's the larger business the larger businesses that we have, the kind of like 20 to 30 are businesses where people live locally and want to bring their team in, and they're fast growing. But the kind of flexible co-working is much more people who want to come in for a few days a week. We found that our kind of 5, 10 and 15 day a month co-working memberships have been really, really popular in Wimbledon, far more so than they are in Hammersmith.
That's an interesting offer. So, I didn't know that was an offer, because mostly it's monthly for X pounds, but you're offering 5, 10, 15.
We've offered we've kind of extended the range of our offering on the flexible scale towards even more flexibility in Wimbledon, and have seen a lot of traction there. But we've also seen a lot of demand for people who want a nice small office in a nice space, well located near the station with great amenities.
Brilliant. So in terms of sustainability, which is a kind of word a lot of developers we talk to like to use, and sometimes I do wonder, walking the walk and talking the talk are 2 separate things, but there can't be many shopping centres with rooftop farms on them where microgreens, herbs, seasonal vegetables and mushrooms are grown, as well as bees, and I'm lucky enough to have a jar of the honey which has been produced from the rooftop. Why? What made you go down that route of kind of a circular economy approach to things that you're taking?
So it sounds a bit mad when you put it like that. But it really, again, goes back to what our overall approach with the centre is, which is about making it something that is a local community space. And the idea is it is a local community farm that has a local story and engages local people. The idea came out of some of those strange kind of lockdown moments we all had when we probably had a little bit too much time on our hands, not enough time socialising with other people, where I was trying to think about ways that we could use some of the waste products produced by our buildings productively. And it turns out that used coffee grounds, which are obviously produced by all our cafes and workspaces, are the perfect substrate for growing oyster mushrooms on. And so we started as only a small mushroom farm on the roof, and it's expanded since to include, as you point out, other kitchen garden produce. We do regular tours and events throughout the year. The tours are some of the most popular things that we do within the centre. We have always looked to try and make it about this local story, both for local people and for local businesses. So we collect used coffee grounds from a range of local cafes. And then for the last few years, we've been selling all of our produce to local restaurants. Although there's been a bit of a shift recently where we have literally just launched looking to sell local subscription food boxes to people through our cafe. So as part of our co-working space, we've got a cafe on Queen's Road, and we started selling local food boxes as part of that through that piece. But it's really all about engaging local people in being a community use and tying into that overall strategy and overall experience of this isn't just a dropped-in regional shopping centre with a whole bunch of global chains, but this is a local neighbourhood space that feels like a Wimbledon centre. And actually, if you were going to do it in another part of London, it would look very different because it's not in Wimbledon.
But as we mentioned, Wimbledon has performed especially well post-pandemic when compared to a lot of other places in London. It does have a local feel where local people want to go, I guess, which must have benefited Wimbledon Quarter. But what is it you think that makes it Wimbledon so unique that local people are shopping here? Because it isn't happening in a lot of places across London. We are seeing footfall declining in shopping centres and town centres.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think Wimbledon has this amazing local identity, which is one of the kind of soft measures that is easy to forget but is relevant, where it's has a local feel that is uniquely Wimbledon and not just part of London. I think some of the cultural things that exist in Wimbledon are part of that, with the theatre. It has the only kids theatre in the country as well, with the poker theatre, or maybe one of only two. So it has some amazing, as well as the sports, the local sports teams, etc. It has a really strong local sense of identity. But the other thing I'd say is that the kind of demographic base that you have in Wimbledon, of actually quite a young demographic base as well, is uniquely strong. And the things I was talking about earlier of the kind of coffee shop that in 6 months of trading does better than the whole year during lockdowns has emerged as a post-COVID trend within places like Wimbledon. But I think Wimbledon is probably one of the most kind of extreme examples of that, which is that people aren't going to offices 5 days a week anymore on average. And during the pandemic, it was obviously all at home, and prior it was majority in the office. But we've kind of entered this kind of new in-between state now, where a lot of people seem to have reached a stage where they go into the office 2 to 3 days a week, and they work from or near home for 2 to 3 days a week. And what that's meant is that about a third of the weekly spend and weekly time that people have in their lives, instead of spending it in the West End and the city, they're spending it in their local area, or in this case in Wimbledon. And so that we're seeing that in the footfall numbers I mentioned that the bid have, and we also managed to, in partnership with Merton Council, get some actual spend data from MasterCard. And again, that actually shows even more so that footfall, that there's more spend in Wimbledon than ever. And we're seeing that come through in our numbers in the centre as well.
So even though people are staying at home, I want to say our business is 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, and I can't see that changing anytime soon. I think it's for the better in many respects. But come back, retail and shops do have to compete with the internet. And home deliveries increasingly. I mean, you can't move for moped drivers around where I live, dropping off fast food at people's houses. So the coffee shops do actually have to compete with those guys. If you were looking to kind of apply any lessons that you've learned to a future shopping centre proposal, do you think this is the main challenge? Is that competition with online?
So I actually don't think it is, because I think for for the last kind of decade or so, the way that the online versus traditional offline retailers work is they've kind of been set up as opposing camps.
Yes.
And there's kind of been, Amazon and ASOS and Boohoo or whatever emerge, and they take share away from Debenhams and John Lewis and the traditional incumbents. And that is what's happened. But actually, I think that what's happened in the last few years is there's been a realization that actually neither of those models work, right? Yeah. The kind of old Debenhams models failed, but actually these online shopping models are also failing. That the costs of delivery and return are absolutely mad. And really the retailers that are making things work successfully, generally speaking, are finding an interesting model that bridges both, and they're not viewing bricks and mortar and online as separate, but actually part of a coherent strategy where you perhaps go into store and you experience a product that you then maybe buy at home when you have the chance to research and price check, that you then might actually go and collect again from your local store or from a local locker near you, and also make the return locally. And actually that allows you to have the convenience and, frankly, being able to make a purchase in your own home, but actually experience things and touch things and return things without the costs of doing so. And I actually think this is where places like Wimbledon Quarter and other centres can be really powerful in the future, is that you have a collective ability here to put together for a whole bunch of different shops, restaurants, cafes, a collective approach to online and offline. And so they can have their offline store where people can experience it. They can then use these huge service yards that these centres have to help with fulfillment and returns and click and collect. And they then have their web presence where they can have do the sales and manage that side of things. So I actually think there's a real opportunity with these real estate assets for them to become part of a fully integrated approach to kind of basically multimodal shopping.
So what do you see your role then as the owner of a centre? Are you providing a blank canvas where people can curate, or are you curating for people to attract them in? Because it must be hard to know what the trends are going to be in 5 years' time. So how do you have a medium-term strategy in terms of letting the space? Is it literally just a shell, or do you look to do a bit more?
To be honest, it varies. We are generally very, very hands-on with our approach and our team. So we have the capabilities to be able to fit spaces out for people with our in-house construction team. And we don't use any managing agents, and all of our team on site are there to manage and support. And for example, in the office sector in particular, we have our own co-working brand that's fully serviced. We have our own managed proposition that's fully managed, and we have our lease piece where we're arm's length, and we frankly don't get in their way if they don't want us to. But actually, the combination of all three is critical, because for some businesses, they want something very simple and plug and play. Some want something a little bit more bespoke, but actually nice and easy, and others want to just get on with it and procure everything and do it themselves. And to an extent, that applies to retailers too. There's some who want a completely blank canvas, and it's really about us and them deciding whether they're the right fit for the centre. And there's others who actually want a more fitted offering, and it's about bringing it all together in a way that works, and recognising that actually the people who are working in the co-working space are the shoppers in the shop, and are the people working out in the gym, and the people eating in the cafes, and actually in our case live locally as well. And you're suddenly coming to this centre to do a whole bigger range of different uses, and you're staying in the centre for a whole lot longer than you otherwise would.
So it's all about flexibility on behalf of the tenant, and flexibility yourself as the owner and the curator.
And we go, and it ties into as well how we think about the experience too. So we've kind of completely changed how the marketing budget was deployed within the centre. Historically, nearly all of it went in terms of sponsorships and a few events throughout the year. And we've basically hugely reduced our sponsorship budget and made it much more about us doing things within the centre that local people can experience. And so we have sustainable fashion shows in September. We show the tennis when the tennis is on, and the Six Nations when the rugby's on. We do an ice rink during the Christmas period. And so it's more about us actually doing more stuff locally that people can experience, rather than us just pushing our brand out onto other people's external offerings. And we've taken it this is almost to a kind of an even further level recently, where we've actually launched our own online media business within Wimbledon.
As you do.
Which is called the Wimble.
The Wimble,
And the idea behind the Wimble is actually we want to take this idea of community that I was trying to explain as we're building in a physical form within the centre, but actually apply that beyond the centre. So we don't just engage with people when they come in for an event or they come in to shop or go to the gym, but actually we are also being part of their conversation when they're at home or when they're engaging online.
Yeah, it's about touch point, isn't it? You're there.
Exactly. And the idea is it's a kind of Wimbledon publication for people of Wimbledon. We have a local journalist who writes all the pieces, and we feature all kinds of pieces involving the theatre, pieces involving the local football team, new shop openings. And the idea is that we're creating this community space in the centre, and we're creating this community space online at the same time. And we actually view it as, I guess what I would view as like proper content marketing. As in, we are able, because the centre is becoming this mixed use space as a community, we can also engage with that digitally as well.
So as the owners of Wimbledon Quarter, do you still see yourself being here in 10 years' time? And if so, what do you think the shopping centre would look like then? Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, we are always long-term investors. We have been investing in properties in Hammersmith and Fulham in the city for 50 years, and we don't really have an exit. We acquire slowly, and we look to invest for the long term. And we also recognise that we're not finished, and we'll need to continue to invest. And part of the problem that I think that exists in a lot of real estate is that the way that a lot of real estate organisations are structured is they're structured according to cycles of funding. And so they go through often a 5-year cycle where they buy, reposition, and then sell.
Then exit,
And then often the people who buy it will then buy and hold, and it'll frankly just decline. And you then end up with assets that basically go through these cycles of being brand new and shiny and then declining, and then being made to be brand new and shiny and then declining. But we don't look at it like that, because we look over a 50+ year timescale, and we recognise that in 5 years' time we will need to continually reinvest in the centre. And actually, we don't know over 50 years what uses are going to be the right ones, but because this centre is located in Wimbledon with this strong catchment, and because we've set things up in a way that allow us to bring in a whole range of different uses, that actually what we might have in 10 years' time is we may discover that some of the things we put in did really well, some of them did okay, a couple of them didn't, and actually we need to mix of uses around again. But having a centre that's structured around a mixture of uses rather than the kind of retail monoculture actually makes us a lot more resilient to what might come in the future.
So it all comes back to that flexibility of offer.
Comes back to flexibility of offer, and yes, we might see more shops coming again. We might see more workspace. We might see more leisure. We might see all entirely different new uses. We might see some more private medical, healthcare, well-being. But fundamentally, we think that people who live locally will always want local uses and local things and local experiences to do. And actually, whether it is online or offline, physical spaces have a role in both spheres.
Well, I think we can see with the footfall numbers it's clearly working in Wimbledon. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the podcast, Alex. That was really interesting. Any last words?
No, thank you very much, Nick.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I would say go check out Wimbledon Quarter.